Patricia Brown sat in her room staring at the mirror with tired eyes. The air smelled of roses and the mansion was filled with music and laughter. It was her engagement day. Everyone outside was waiting to see her walk down in a beautiful gown and say yes to a man she had never met. His name was Henry Grant, the eldest son of the powerful Grant family. A man known for being rich, cold, and full of pride. People whispered that he barely smiled, that he didn't care about feelings, that he was marrying her only because of a business deal between their families. Patricia hated it. She wasn't the type of girl to sit quietly and follow orders. She had trained in martial arts since she was little. She was smart, strong, and stubborn, and she had made up her mind. She would not marry a man she didn't love, a man she had never even spoken to. As the music grew louder downstairs, Patricia quietly opened her closet. Behind her gowns and high heels, she had hidden a small bag and simple clothes, jeans, a loose shirt, and a cap. She changed quickly and tied her breast down tightly. She looked more like a man now. Then she moved like a shadow through the hallway. A guard stood near the back door. "Stop!" he shouted, but before he could blink, Patricia moved. A quick kick to the stomach, a twist of the arm. Another guard reached for her. She dropped him with a sweep of her leg. They fell with soft groans. She didn't want to hurt them, only to escape. Heart racing, she ran through the garden, pushing past flowers and decorations. People were still busy laughing and drinking inside. No one saw her. She hid behind a parked car, breathing hard, putting on a fake mustache. "Most dangerous place is the safest," she whispered to herself with a smile. She reached for the car's side mirror. Her fingers shook as she adjusted the cap, pressed her short wig in place, and checked her face. Her mustache looked firm, her eyes calm. She looked like a slim young man. "From today," she said, "my name is Patrick." Just then, the back door of the car opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, adjusting his wristwatch. He didn't even notice her at first. She quickly moved back, heart pounding. The man got into the car and drove off, unaware that the stranger fixing her disguise beside his car just moments ago was supposed to be his bride. His name? Henry Grant. And Patricia had just escaped her own wedding to him. Back at the Grant mansion, things were far from quiet. Henry Grant stood tall in the grand living room, dressed sharply in a dark suit, but his face was unreadable. The news had already spread. Patricia Brown had run away from their engagement. Across the room, his half-brother Harry leaned back on the leather sofa, smirking like he had just won a game. "So, the famous Henry Grant got stood up," Harry said loudly, twirling a wineglass in his hand. "Guess she'd rather marry a ghost than you." The others in the room chuckled. But it didn't stop there. Cynthia, Henry's ex-girlfriend, now Harry's new flame, sat beside him, wearing a tight red dress and a smile full of spite. She leaned forward and added sweetly, "Maybe she saw the way you look at people, Henry. So stiff. No heart. I wouldn't blame her for running." Henry didn't say a word. He stared at the window, jaw tight, fingers curled around the cuff of his sleeve. Harry laughed. "Honestly, brother, you've always been second best at love. Maybe you should try finding a nice, ordinary girl. Someone not afraid of your frozen heart." Henry turned slowly. "Worry about yourself, Harry." Then he walked out. He didn't stop until he reached his car. The driver was already inside, engine running, waiting for orders. Henry got in without a word and told him to just drive. "Anywhere," he muttered, staring out the tinted window. Meanwhile, Patricia, now fully in disguise Patrick, was wandering the busy streets of the city. Her cap was pulled low, the bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't have a plan. She just needed to stay far from her family and anyone who might recognize her. But she knew them well, and she wasn't surprised when she saw two of her father's men, wearing sunglasses, checking faces and asking questions. "Damn," she whispered, ducking into a narrow alley. She turned sharply, heart racing, and spotted a sleek black car parked quietly by the road. The area was quiet, only a few pedestrians, and the car looked familiar, but she didn't have time to think.
The two guards were closing in. Patricia hurried toward the car and crouched beside it, breathing hard. Inside, Henry Grant was seated in the back seat, lost in deep thought, staring blankly ahead. The driver sat in front. The footsteps got closer. Patricia had no choice. She reached up, pulled the car door open and slid inside quickly, shutting it softly behind her. Henry blinked in surprise and turned sharply. "Who are you?" he asked. Patricia froze.
For a moment, neither of them spoke. She swallowed hard and forced a calm voice. "My name is Patrick. I was told to report here today. I'm your new bodyguard." Henry narrowed his eyes. "Bodyguard?" "Yes, sir. I was assigned by Central Security. I got lost while tracking your location. Sorry for the sudden entry. I thought it would be better to wait inside the car than stand out there." Henry studied the slim young man in front of him. Sharp eyes, calm tone, no panic even when caught. He didn't look strong, but something about him felt focused. You don't talk much." "That's good," Henry said at last. "Fine. Get in properly. Sit." Patricia blinked, surprised. "You're hiring me?" "I don't have time for interviews. I can see you're not ordinary," Henry replied. "You're in." She sat still, trying not to let the relief show on her face. Just like that, the man she had been forced to marry, the one she ran away from, had unknowingly just hired her as his personal bodyguard. And he didn't recognize her at all, and neither did she. The driver pulled into a long private driveway. Tall trees lined both sides, and a grand white mansion slowly came into view. Patricia, still playing the role of Patrick, couldn't help but stare. The place was massive, bigger than her parents' mansion. Elegant marble pillars, sparkling glass windows, and gardens that stretched forever. Her heart thudded in her chest. "This is where he lives," she whispered to herself, the kind stranger she had tricked into employing her. Before she could say more, a housekeeper opened her door. "You must be the new bodyguard. Come, let me show you to the staff quarters." Patricia nodded, keeping her voice low and firm. "Thank you." As she followed the housekeeper through the polished hallways, she passed portraits of important-looking people, grand staircases, and glittering chandeliers. When she reached the staff quarters, she was handed a contract to sign. Her eyes widened when she saw the salary. $1,000 a month? She gasped under her breath. For pretending to be a boy? For staying hidden? She couldn't believe her luck. Patricia clenched her fists. No matter what, I must not get caught, she told herself. Meanwhile, Henry Grant had entered the mansion through the side door. His shoulders were stiff. His face was colder than the wind outside. Inside the family study, a storm was already brewing. His father, Mr. Grant, sat behind a large oak desk, face dark with anger. His half-brother Harry lounged nearby, trying to hide his grin. Beside them stood Madame Lydia, Henry's stepmother, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. "Useless boy," Mr. Grant spat, slamming a file onto the table. "You can't even keep a girl who was handed to you on a silver platter." Henry remained silent, standing tall. "You made us a laughingstock today. Investors are asking questions. Do you know what that means?" "I never asked for the engagement, and from all indications, neither did Miss Patricia," Henry said calmly. Madame Lydia stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Dear, maybe it's time you step aside and let Harry handle things. He's more capable." Harry chuckled smugly. "At least I know how to keep a woman from running. Cynthia is mine now." Mr. Grant pointed a trembling finger at Henry. "Keep this up, and I'll transfer the family business to Harry. You hear me?" Henry's jaw tightened. His next words were low but strong. "This company, these family assets, came from my mother. Everything you have now was built on her blood and sweat. You only hold it because she died early." The room fell silent. Mr. Grant's face darkened even more. "Dead or alive, it's mine now, and I choose who to give." Henry said nothing more. He turned on his heel and walked out. Behind him, Madame Lydia and Harry exchanged smug looks, believing they had already won. In the mansion's quarters, Patricia sat nervously in her cozy staff room when her phone buzzed.
It was her father's number. Her heart sank. She hesitated, but something inside her told her to pick up. "Patricia." Her father's voice sounded urgent. "Your mother. She's very sick. Come home quickly." Patricia froze. "What? Is it serious?" "Yes," he said heavily. "She keeps asking for you." Her chest tightened. Without thinking too much, she tore off her fake mustache, let her hair loose, changed into a simple dress she had hidden in her bag, and rushed out. The Brown family home was quiet when she arrived. Too quiet. She burst through the front door. "Dad? Mom?" No answer. Then heavy footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around and saw parents standing there with serious faces. Her father stepped forward. "You thought you could run forever. Patricia, you must marry Henry Grant. Tonight, if needed." Patricia's eyes widened in horror. "You lied," she whispered. "Mom's not sick at all." "We did what we had to do," her dad said coldly. "This family's honor is at stake." Without waiting another second, Patricia turned on her heels and sprinted for the staircase. "Stop her!" someone shouted. Patricia didn't stop. She yanked open a window at the top of the stairs, kicked out the screen, and jumped down, landing hard on her feet outside. Ignoring the pain, she ran, her heart pounding with fear and anger. Back in the darkness of the city streets, Patricia ducked into a corner, panting. She pulled out her disguise kit from her bag. Hands trembling, she tied down her chest again, pinned her hair up, glued the mustache back in place, and became Patrick once more. She wiped her face roughly. "I will never be trapped again," she muttered. And she headed straight back to the only place she had now, Henry's mansion. By the time Patricia, now fully dressed again as Patrick, returned to the Grant mansion, the night had already swallowed the city in darkness. She slipped quietly into the staff quarters, heart still racing from her daring escape. She had no time to waste. From tomorrow she would truly begin her life as Henry Grant's bodyguard. The next morning, Patricia stood tall at the entrance, dressed neatly in her assigned uniform. Her cap was pulled low, her fake mustache firmly in place. Henry was already awake, looking sharper than ever in a simple black shirt and dark trousers. He gave her a short nod as she approached. "You're early," he said without much emotion. "Bodyguards should always be earlier than their boss," Patricia replied calmly. A small flicker of amusement crossed Henry's face. It disappeared almost immediately. "Follow me," he said. That day, the mansion was full of quiet tension. Henry had made a decision. He was moving out of the main family house and into one of the private mansions that his mother had left behind. Patricia packed her few things into a small bag and climbed into the back of the black SUV behind Henry. His driver led the convoy through the winding roads of the city. They drove for almost an hour until they reached another estate, even more beautiful but quieter than the last. Tall gates opened silently as they pulled in. Patricia couldn't hide her amazement. The mansion wasn't just big, it was peaceful. A home, not a prison. Henry stepped out without saying much, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. "Get comfortable," he said to Patrick without looking back. "You'll be living here from now on." "Yes, sir," Patricia said, her voice steady. Days passed. Patricia began her duties seriously. She shadowed Henry during meetings, at the company, and even at charity galas. She learned quickly that Henry, though cold on the outside, worked harder than anyone else. His people respected him deeply. He didn't waste words, but when he spoke, people listened. And when he smiled, rare as it was genuine and warm. Patricia used her martial arts skills well. Once at a business banquet, she noticed a man acting suspiciously near Henry. Without making a scene, she skillfully positioned herself between them, cutting the danger off before Henry even noticed. Another time, she caught a reporter trying to snap private photos of Henry at a restaurant. With a simple, firm move, she blocked the camera and escorted the man away politely but firmly. Henry began to notice. One evening, as they sat quietly in the private lounge after another long day, he spoke without turning his head. "You're different from the others," he said simply. Patricia, standing at ease near the window, didn't respond immediately. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded slightly but said no more. Still, despite the small cracks showing in his tough shell, Patricia could see it clearly. Her boss was distant, guarded. He hid his heart well, like a man who had been hurt too many times to trust easily. There was sadness behind his eyes, buried deep, but also a kindness he tried hard to cover. The more time Patricia spent with him, the more she wondered about the real man behind the cold mask. And yet, through it all, she still didn't realize the man she was now protecting, the man she was slowly beginning to admire, was the same man she had run away from at her own engagement party. Later that day, the evening air buzzed with soft music and flashing lights. Patricia stood silently near the entrance of the Grand Hotel ballroom, keeping an alert eye on the crowd. She was dressed in a smart black suit, blending in perfectly with the other security staff. Beside her, Henry moved through the guests with the same calm authority he always carried. It was another corporate event, another night to survive. Patricia focused on her job, watching, listening, guarding. But then, something caught her ear. Two well-dressed women nearby were whispering excitedly, not realizing the young bodyguard standing close enough to hear. "That's Henry Grant," one of them said, pointing subtly toward her boss, "the eldest son of the Grant family." "The handsome one," the other woman added with a giggle. "The heir everyone talks about." Patricia stiffened slightly. The eldest son of the Grant family? The name Grant made her stomach twist painfully. It was a name she had spent months trying to erase from her mind, even before running away from her engagement. But she forced herself to breathe normally. "No," she told herself quickly. "It can't be. It's just a common last name." No, I've always called him boss. I never even asked for his full name. This is my fault." She shook her head lightly, trying to push the worry away, and she couldn't afford to start imagining things. That night, after the event, Patricia walked slowly back toward her cozy room in Henry's private mansion. The soft hum of the city outside the window couldn't calm the racing thoughts in her mind. Still dressed as Patrick, she sat on the edge of her bed, chewing her lip nervously. Something didn't feel right. A few minutes later, she heard voices coming from the main living area, low but sharp. Curiosity pulled her toward the half-open door. Carefully, she peeked through the gap and listened. Mr. Grant's voice was unmistakable, cold and angry. "You think just because you are your mother's son, you have the right to question me." And Henry's voice came back, steady as ever. "I have every right. I am the rightful heir." Madame Lydia's sweet, poisonous tone floated in next. "After tonight's event, everyone in the city knows you as Henry Grant, the eldest son of the Grant family. You have always stayed elusive, not wanting to show your face in public. Why now?" Patricia's heart dropped into her stomach. She didn't need to hear more. Henry Grant, Grant family. It wasn't a coincidence. It was real. Her knees weakened as she stumbled back into her room, shutting the door quietly behind her. She sank onto the floor, pressing her palms against her pounding chest. It's him. It's really him. The man she had been working for, protecting, laughing with in quiet moments. The man she had been slowly, unknowingly falling for. The very man she ran away from was her betrothed. Patricia covered her mouth to keep from making a sound. She sat there for what felt like hours, the clock ticking loudly in the silent room. Her mind raced with questions. Should I run again? Should I confess everything? But every time she thought about leaving, she pictured Henry's rare, soft smiles, his silent support, his hidden kindness. Her heart ached. Running had been easy before, but now, there were feelings. Feelings she didn't know how to fight anymore. For the first time in her life, Patricia Brown was truly afraid not of getting caught, but of losing something she hadn't even realized she wanted so badly. A few days later, the rain poured down hard that night, beating against the windows like a warning. Patricia sat in her small room, still shaken from the truth she had discovered. She couldn't sleep. Her heart and mind were too heavy. Somewhere deep inside, she knew she should leave, escape again before everything exploded. But something stronger made her stay, something she didn't want to name yet. Suddenly, a sharp knock rattled her door.
"Patrick!" It was Henry's assistant, sounding urgent. "Come quick. Mr. Grant is not feeling well. I need you to watch over him while I get some medicines." Patricia jumped to her feet. She found Henry in his study, leaning heavily against the desk, his face pale and sweaty. He tried to wave her away stubbornly. "I'm fine," he said in a rough voice. But he wasn't. His breathing was uneven, his forehead burned with fever. "Sir, you're burning up," Patricia said, stepping closer without thinking. "You need to lie down." Henry swayed slightly. Without waiting for permission, Patricia quickly slipped her arm around his waist, steadying him. He was surprisingly heavy, but she held firm, guiding him gently to the couch. He didn't argue this time. His strength was failing him. Patricia grabbed a small towel from the bathroom, soaked it in cold water, and placed it gently on his forehead. Henry closed his eyes, his breathing slowly settling. She sat beside him on the floor, watching him carefully. He looked so different like this, vulnerable, tired, real. All the walls he usually built around himself were gone tonight. What remained was just a man, hurting, lonely, human. Patricia felt her chest tighten painfully. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from his forehead. "You don't always have to be so strong, you know," she whispered. The hours dragged by slowly. Patricia stayed beside him the entire night, changing the towel when it grew warm, checking his temperature, and making sure he drank small sips of water. At some point, Henry stirred. His hand reached out blindly, grabbing her wrist. "Don't go," he muttered in a hoarse whisper, half dreaming. Patricia froze. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. He relaxed again, his grip loosening, falling back into sleep. But her heart was anything but calm. By morning, Henry's fever had dropped slightly. His skin was still warm, but no longer frighteningly hot. When he finally opened his eyes, he found Patrick, small, serious Patrick, napping awkwardly on the floor beside the couch, arms crossed, head against the wall. For a long moment, Henry just stared at him. Something inside him twisted strangely. He didn't understand it. Patrick was just a boy. Just a bodyguard. Nothing special. And yet, why did seeing Patrick's sleeping face make his chest feel warm? Why had he slept better last night than he had in months? Because Patrick was beside him? Henry frowned and rubbed his forehead. "This is madness. He's a man. I'm straight. What's wrong with me?" Still, even as he told himself to stop, he couldn't tear his eyes away from the small, tired figure sitting loyally by his side. In that moment, without even realizing it properly, Henry Grant started to fall for Patrick. And it terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced. The day after Henry's fever broke, something changed between him and Patrick. Henry still wore his cold mask most of the time, but now, every once in a while, Patricia would catch him stealing quick glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Soft, thoughtful glances. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle he couldn't understand. Patricia kept her head down, pretending not to notice. Her heart had enough battles already. Later that afternoon, Henry called her into his study. "You're coming with me to a banquet tonight," he said simply. Patricia blinked. "Me, sir?" "Yes," Henry said without looking up from his papers. "As my date." She nearly choked on air. "Sir? But I am a man, sir," she started to protest. "I know, but you're the only one I trust right now," Henry interrupted, his voice cool and firm. "Besides, it'll be fun to see their faces." Patricia swallowed hard. She understood immediately. Henry wasn't just picking a bodyguard tonight. He was sending a message to his father, to Madame Lydia, to Harry, and everyone who thought they could control his life. And somehow, he had chosen her to stand beside him. That night, the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel gleamed under thousands of lights. It was a night for the city's richest and most powerful. When Henry Grant entered the room, all heads turned. He was perfection, in a tailored black suit, his presence commanding as always. But when the crowd saw who was walking beside him, the slim, handsome young man named Patrick, The whispers exploded. "Who's that?" "Henry brought a man." "Is he serious?" At the front of the hall, Mr. Grant's face darkened immediately. Madame Lydia clutched her wineglass so hard her knuckles turned white. Harry nearly choked on his drink. The plan had been simple: find a new woman to fix Henry's reputation after Patricia Brown had run away. Instead, Henry had brought a young man as his date, smiling faintly, daring the world to judge him. The murmurs grew louder. Patricia kept her head high, her fake mustache perfect, her heart pounding inside her chest. Henry leaned down slightly and said in a low voice, "Relax. Let them choke." As they made their way through the hall, Harry couldn't resist. He stepped into their path, blocking them with a fake smile. "Well, well," Harry said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Brother, I must say, you always surprise us. A bodyguard as your date? How modern." Laughter rippled around them. Henry's smile didn't falter. But before he could reply, Patricia, stepped forward smoothly, placing her outstretched hand between Henry and Harry. With a firm but polite voice, she said, "Please step aside, sir. Mr. Grant doesn't waste time with clowns." The hall went dead silent. Henry's eyes flickered with amusement, but he hid it well. Harry's face twisted with rage, but he had no choice. He stepped aside, humiliated. The crowd whispered even more fiercely now. Across the room, Stella, the wealthy socialite known for chasing Henry's attention, watched everything with furious eyes. Her red lips curled into a cruel smile. "So that's the boy. I cannot believe he dumped a pretty woman like me only to settle for a man," she whispered to her friend. "Patrick, right? Let's see how long he lasts. This is just unbelievable. I cannot believe a handsome man like him chose to fall in love with his male bodyguard. Something must be at play here, and I must find out what." She had already begun planning. She would find out everything about this Patrick and destroy him piece by piece. Meanwhile, Madame Lydia and Harry huddled together near the back of the hall. "If we can't beat him with a woman," Madame Lydia whispered, "we'll ruin him with scandal." Harry grinned. "Let's give the city something to talk about." As Patricia stood beside Henry at the banquet, feeling the weight of every stare and every whisper, she forced herself to stay calm. But deep down, she knew tonight had changed everything. The battle had truly begun, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The morning after the banquet, the whole city was buzzing. Newspapers, gossip blogs, and business groups were all whispering the same thing. Henry Grant had brought a young man as his date to the biggest event of the year. Some were shocked, some were laughing, some were plotting. But Henry didn't care. And neither did Patricia. At least, she told herself she didn't. She stayed close to Henry as always, keeping her head low, her disguise perfect. Yet everywhere they went now, people stared harder, looked longer. One afternoon, as Henry's car pulled up outside a private business club, Patricia caught a glimpse of someone that made her blood run cold, her mother, together with a few of their family guards, standing across the street, searching the crowds with worried eyes. Patricia's heart nearly stopped. In a panic, she pulled down her cap, adjusted her fake mustache, and quickly leaned toward the side mirror of Henry's car to fix her makeup and appearance. She smudged a bit of dirt on her cheeks to look rougher, deepened her voice in practice. She couldn't afford to be recognized. Not now. When she finally calmed her breathing, she slipped out of the car and followed Henry inside without looking back. The danger wasn't just from her past anymore. Henry's enemies were moving too. One evening, at a large corporate event, Patricia felt something strange as she scanned the room. A man in a waiter's outfit moved toward Henry carrying a tray, moving too fast, too sharp. Patricia's instincts screamed. Without a second thought, she threw herself between Henry and the approaching man. A splash of liquid flew through the air, acid meant for Henry's face. It missed, landing on the floor and sizzling dangerously. The crowd screamed. Security rushed in. The man was tackled to the ground. Henry stared at Patrick, small, fierce Patrick, who stood protectively in front of him, breathing hard but refusing to back down. For a second, something unspoken passed between them. Something stronger than loyalty. But the attacks didn't stop. Harry and Stella had been watching carefully, and they weren't done yet. A few days later, Harry set another trap. He invited Henry to a private hotel suite under the excuse of signing an important business deal. But when Henry arrived, his drink was already poisoned with an aphrodisiac. It didn't take long for the drug to take effect. Henry stumbled, his vision blurring, his mind slowing down. Meanwhile, hidden reporters waited outside the suite, ready to catch scandalous photos. If the plan worked, Henry would be finished, humiliated beyond repair. But once again, Patricia was there. She had followed quietly, sensing something was wrong. When she burst into the suite, she found Henry barely conscious, struggling to keep his balance. "Patrick," he slurred, reaching out weakly. Patricia wasted no time. She threw Henry's arm over her shoulder, half carrying him out a back door before the reporters could snap a single photo. They made it to a small hidden apartment that she sometimes used for emergencies. Patricia helped him onto the bed, her hands trembling slightly. Henry mumbled, his eyes half closed. "Don't. Leave me." Patricia brushed his hair gently from his forehead. "I won't," she whispered. Slowly, carefully, she wiped the sweat from his face, cooled his burning skin with wet cloths, and stayed by his side. Somewhere in the middle of the night, as Henry fought the effects of the drug, he reached for her hand, pulling her down beside him. Their faces were so close, their breaths mixing. Without fully understanding what he was doing, Henry kissed her. Patricia froze, but only for a second. Then softly she kissed him back. It was desperate, messy, full of all the feelings both of them had buried for too long. They didn't think about tomorrow. They didn't think about lies or truth. They only felt. That night, in that tiny hidden room, Henry and Patricia crossed a line they could never uncross. By morning, the sunlight crept through the curtains. Patricia woke first, her heart heavy with panic. Henry was still asleep, his face peaceful, his hand loosely holding hers. She knew she couldn't stay. Before he could open his eyes and recognize the truth, before he could see that Patrick wasn't real, she slipped away. When Henry finally woke, his head pounded. He didn't remember everything clearly. Only flashes. A soft hand, a warm kiss, a feeling of being safe, but no clear face. He sat up slowly, rubbing his forehead. His mind drifted back to Patrick. Was it Patrick? No, he is a man. He remembered being with a woman, and although he could not remember her face, he had never felt so happy, so satisfied. But something about Patrick, the way he spoke softly, the way he touched him gently, almost like he wasn't a man at all, the way he made Henry's frozen heart feel alive again. Henry frowned. He didn't understand it yet, but deep inside he had begun to suspect the truth. He didn't speak much after that night. He returned to work, his face colder than ever, his walls taller and thicker. But inside a storm was brewing. He kept thinking about Patrick, about the flashes of memory he couldn't piece together, the feeling of being kissed, the feeling of being held. Something didn't add up. And yet he pushed it all down, buried it. He had bigger problems now. Harry and Madame Lydia were furious after their failed trap at the hotel. But they weren't the kind of people to give up easily. In fact, they only became more dangerous. "If we can't destroy him with scandals," Madame Lydia said with a sharp smile, "we'll destroy his image completely." Harry leaned back, chuckling. Let the world believe he's different. Their new plan was cruel. They would twist the city's gossip about Henry and his bodyguard Patrick. Make it seem like Henry was not just cold and arrogant, but scandalously in love with his male bodyguard. In a city obsessed with appearances, that rumor could destroy everything Henry had worked for. But they didn't stop there. A few days later, just when things seemed to calm down, a beautiful woman appeared at the Grant Group office, crying dramatically in front of reporters. Her name was Stella. She claimed she was Henry's ex-girlfriend, that Henry had spent the night with her, that she was pregnant with his child. "I'm carrying Mr. Grant's baby," she cried into the microphones. "He used me and abandoned me." The city exploded with gossip once again. Patricia, standing silently beside Henry during the news report, felt her stomach twist with anger and confusion. Henry's jaw tightened as he watched Stella's performance. He knew it was a lie. He had never even touched Stella. He barely even remembered parts of that night after being drugged, only the soft warmth beside him that still haunted his dreams. And he knew. It hadn't been Stella, but not remembering the woman's face made him doubt himself a little, so he said nothing. Inside the Grant mansion, the mood grew darker. Mr. Francis Grant, Henry's father, slammed a newspaper down on the dining table. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time," he roared. Henry stood stiffly across from him, silent but unbroken. "First, you parade around with a male bodyguard like it's normal," Mr. Grant spat. "Then this woman showed up pregnant, throwing dirt on our name." Madame Lydia sat smugly nearby, pretending to sip her tea. Harry grinned openly. Mr. Grant pointed a shaking finger at Henry. "You are no longer worthy to inherit this family's name or wealth," he shouted. "I'm giving everything to Harry." Henry's heart twisted, not because of the money or the name, but because, once again, the people who were supposed to love him only cared about how he looked on paper. No one asked if the rumors were true. No one asked if he was hurt. No one cared what he really felt. They only cared about pride, about business, about power. Henry clenched his fists quietly at his sides. Let them think what they want. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Patricia watched everything unfold, her heart breaking for the man she was supposed to fear and hate. And yet, somehow, she found herself wanting to protect him even more, even if it meant losing herself completely. The days after Stella's public scene were like walking through a minefield. Everywhere Henry went, whispers followed him. People stared longer, smiled faker. Old business partners avoided his calls. Some even started pulling out of projects quietly. And through it all, Henry stayed silent, cold, unmoving. But Patricia knew he was bleeding inside. One afternoon, Patricia was summoned unexpectedly. Instead of Henry, it was Mr. Francis Grant himself who wanted to see her alone. She followed the butler nervously to a private office inside the mansion. Mr. Grant sat behind a heavy oak desk, his hands clasped together, his sharp eyes staring at her like she was an insect he wanted to crush. "You're Patrick, right?" he said, without waiting for her to sit. "The bodyguard who turned my son's life into a joke." Patricia said nothing. She kept her face blank, her cap pulled low. Mr. Grant leaned forward. "I'm offering you $3 million, he said slowly, every word dripping with contempt. "Take it. Disappear. Leave Henry's life forever." Patricia's chest tightened. $3 million. He believed she could start a whole new life with that money. She could run far, far away. But what he didn't know was, she wasn't with Henry for money. She is a rich heiress herself. Somewhere inside her, anger burned hotter than fear. She wasn't the problem here. They were. They and their greed, their lies, their cruelty, and she saw how much it hurt Henry. Patricia smiled slightly, a cold, fearless smile that she rarely wore. "I want $8 million, she said calmly. Mr. Grant's eyes widened in disbelief. "You want what?" $8 million, she repeated. "Pay me and I'll disappear. I'll play along. I'll make sure your precious family name stays clean." For a long moment, Mr. Grant just stared at her. Then slowly he began to smile, a cruel, twisted smile. "You're smarter than you look," he said at last. He reached for his phone. "You'll get your money. Make sure you fulfill your end. Vanish." Patricia nodded silently. But inside, she made a different promise to herself. The day of the press conference arrived. The city's top reporters gathered at Grant Group's headquarters. Cameras flashed.
Microphones were shoved forward. Everyone was hungry for more scandal, more drama. Henry stood stiffly at the back, his face stone cold. He hadn't seen Patrick in a while and wondered where he could have gone. Across the room, Madame Lydia and Harry sat together, their faces smug and victorious.
And then it began. Stella stepped forward, tears streaming down her face like a perfect actress. "I never wanted to say this," she sobbed. "But Mr. Grant abandoned me after I got pregnant. He refuses to take responsibility for our child." The cameras clicked wildly. The crowd gasped. Madame Lydia clutched her chest dramatically and added, "And it gets worse. Henry's bodyguard, this Patrick, is not just his employee. He's his secret lover, a homewrecker." People screamed questions. The room exploded with noise. Mr. Grant stepped up next to Stella, clearing his throat. "I'm deeply ashamed," he said loudly into the microphone. "For the good of the Grant family and this company, I have no choice but to strip Henry of his inheritance." He turned to smile warmly at Harry. "From today onward, my son Harry Grant will be the official heir to Grant Group." The reporters went wild, flash after flash after flash. Madame Lydia beamed proudly. Harry puffed up his chest like a peacock. Victory was theirs, or so they thought. The hall was a storm of flashing cameras, loud voices, and fake smiles. Mr. Francis stood tall, pretending to be the noble father saving the family name. Madame Lydia clutched Harry's arm proudly, her face glowing with fake tears. Harry couldn't stop smirking, already imagining himself sitting in Henry's chair as the CEO. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. But then, a figure moved across the stage, quietly at first, almost unnoticed. Patrick. Or so everyone thought. Patricia's hands were trembling, but she pushed through the fear. Her heart beat like a drum inside her chest. She walked slowly to the center of the room, straight toward the microphones. Some of the reporters noticed her first. "Who's that? What's going on?" Mr. Grant frowned. "Get him off the stage," he barked. But it was too late. Patricia reached up, grabbed the edge of her fake mustache, and ripped it off in one clean move. Gasps filled the room. She pulled off the cap, letting her long, dark hair fall free around her shoulders. Reporters stumbled over themselves, trying to get a better shot. Some shouted. Others froze in complete shock. Standing under the blinding lights was not Patrick. It was Patricia Brown. Patrick, no, Patricia, lifted her chin high, her voice steady and clear. "I am not Patrick," she said loudly. "My name is Patricia Brown." More gasps. Yes, the same Patricia Brown who was engaged to Henry Grant long ago. The room fell into a stunned silence. Henry, standing frozen, felt his world tilt. Patricia kept going, her voice gaining strength with every word. "I ran away from the engagement because I was scared. I didn't want to be forced into a marriage with a man I didn't know." She turned to face Stella, who was shrinking back toward Madame Lydia. "And as for this so-called pregnancy," Patricia said, her voice sharp, "it's a complete lie. She was never with Henry." Stella's face turned pale. Patricia faced the crowd again. "I stayed by Henry's side not because I wanted his money or his name," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. "I stayed because—" She took a shaky breath. "Because somewhere along the way, I fell in love with him." The hall exploded again, but this time not with anger, with pure shock. At the side of the stage, Henry's father looked like he might explode. Madame Lydia grabbed Harry's hand tightly, her nails digging into his skin. Harry's face twisted into a mask of fury and panic. Their perfect plan, shattered. But the most stunned of all was Henry himself. He stared at Tina, his heart hammering in his chest. Patricia Brown, the woman he had fought against marrying, the woman he had silently blamed for embarrassing him, the woman he had been forced to forget, was the same woman he had unknowingly fallen in love with. His mind raced back to Patrick's soft care, to the gentle touches, to the loyalty, to the laughter, to the night they shared together under the safety of darkness. It had all been her, always her. Henry's hands shook slightly as he gripped the edge of the podium, trying to steady himself.
For the first time in his life, Henry Grant didn't know whether to be angry, relieved, or simply grateful. Because somehow, against all odds, fate had brought them back together. And this time, it wasn't about contracts or family deals. It was about them. Just them. For a long moment, the hall was frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The cameras flashed like lightning, but even the reporters seemed too stunned to shout their questions. Henry Grant, once the cold, untouchable heir, stood silently, staring at the woman he now knew as Patricia Brown. Patricia. His Patrick. The room spun, but Henry's heart knew one thing clearly. He didn't care about the lies. He didn't care about the disguise. He only cared about her. Slowly, Henry stepped forward. He took the microphone from the stand, his hand steady even though his whole world had just changed. "I know many of you are confused right now," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "You're wondering how I could fall in love with my bodyguard." He paused, looking around at the sea of stunned faces. His eyes settled on Patricia, standing bravely, her face pale but her chin lifted high. "And the answer is simple," Henry said, his voice strong. "I didn't fall for a bodyguard. I didn't fall for a trick." He took another step closer to her. "I fell for the person who stood by me when everyone else turned their backs. I fell for the heart, the loyalty, the courage." A soft gasp rippled through the room. "And whether she's Patrick or Patricia, whether she's wearing a suit or a dress, I love her." Parisia's eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, all the lies, all the pain, all the fear between them melted away. Across the hall, Stella's face twisted into panic. Without waiting for anyone to stop her, she grabbed her purse and fled the hall, her high heels clacking wildly on the marble floor. Reporters shouted after her, but she didn't look back. Her part in the drama was over, and she knew it. Just as the room began buzzing again, an unexpected voice cut through the noise. The old family lawyer, Mr. George, walked into the room. His grey hair and sharp suit gave him a quiet kind of power. "Before any more announcements are made," he said, holding up a thick brown envelope, "there is something that must be read." Everyone fell silent. Madame Lydia's smile froze. Harry shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. George stepped forward and placed the envelope on the table. "This," he said clearly, "is the last will and testament of the late Mrs. Evelyn Grant, Henry's mother." Gasps filled the room. Even Henry looked surprised. "I thought you said there was no will." Mr. Francis cut in, looking completely shocked. Mr. George didn't answer. He just opened the document and read out loud. "All shares, assets, and leadership of Grant Group shall be passed to my son, Henry Grant, upon my death. My only condition is that he must marry, not for power or profit, but to have someone by his side. Someone who will stand with him through everything." The lawyer paused for a heartbeat. "To ensure this, I arranged an engagement with the Brown family, hoping to give my son a partner, not just a wife." Tears pricked Henry's eyes, but he blinked them away. A cold silence swept the hall. All eyes turned toward Harry and Madame Lydia, their faces drained of color. They had gambled everything, and lost it all in front of the world. The lawyer closed the file with a soft snap. "In the eyes of the law and this company," he said firmly, "Henry Grant is the true and only heir of the Grant Group." Reporters exploded into a frenzy. Some cameras zoomed in on Henry's steady face, others on Madame Lydia's furious one. But Henry wasn't looking at them. He wasn't even thinking about the cameras or the inheritance. All he saw was Patricia, the woman he had once rejected without knowing her. The woman he now loved beyond reason. And this time, he would not let her slip away. Not ever again. After the press conference ended, after the lies had crumbled and the truth stood tall, the world outside still buzzed with noise. But inside Henry's private mansion, everything was quiet. Soft evening light spilled through the windows. The air was heavy with emotions that words could not carry. Henry and Patricia sat together in the living room, both still dressed from the chaos of the day, but no longer pretending. No disguises, no lies. Just them,
For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Patricia took a shaky breath and spoke first. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice broke. "I never wanted to lie to you, I was scared." Henry reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "You stayed by my side when everyone else left," he said, his voice low and full of feeling. "You protected me. You fought for me. How could I ever hate you for that?" Tears filled Patricia's eyes. "I didn't even realize when it happened," she said, smiling through her tears. "Somewhere along the way I stopped pretending. I stopped hiding. I fell in love with you, Henry." Henry's heart swelled. He stood up slowly, pulling her with him. "I love you too, Patricia," he said. "Not Patrick. Not the disguise. I love you, the real you." And then, without hesitation, he leaned down and kissed her. It was a kiss full of everything they had held back. The fear, the anger, the hope, the love. Patricia melted into his arms, wrapping herself around him like she had always belonged there. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing, laughing softly, crying a little, and sharing all the small broken pieces of their hearts. Later, they curled up on the big couch together, whispering stories about their pasts, their dreams, their regrets. Patricia told him about her childhood, her fears, her struggles. Henry opened up about his loneliness, his broken family, and the weight he had carried alone for so long. Until finally exhaustion pulled them under, and they fell asleep in each other's arms, safe, warm, and whole. But happiness never lasted long in their world, not with enemies still lurking. Across the city, Harry sat alone in a dark room, his face twisted with rage and madness. Everything had been taken from him. The company, the power, the respect. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right, and he would make them pay. The next day, Patricia was out in the garden when it happened. A black van screeched to a stop. Before she could react, rough hands grabbed her, pulling a blindfold over her eyes. She struggled, kicked, shouted, but they were too many. They dragged her into the van, slammed the doors, and sped away. Hours later, Henry received the call. It was Harry's voice, cold and shaking with hatred. "Come alone," Harry said. "Bring the company documents. Sign everything over to me, or you'll never see your little girlfriend again." The line went dead. Henry's hands tightened into fists. Fear clawed at his chest, but so did fury. He would not lose Patricia. Not now, not ever. Following the instructions, Henry arrived at an old warehouse near the docks. Inside, he found Patricia tied to a chair, her face bruised but her spirit unbroken. Harry stood behind her, holding a knife to her throat. "Sign the papers," Harry barked, "or she dies." Henry's jaw tightened. Without breaking eye contact with Harry, Henry dropped the folder of fake documents he had brought, buying a precious second. Then he moved, fast, like lightning. The fight was brutal. Harry was desperate and wild, swinging the knife madly. But Henry fought with purpose, with love burning in every punch and kick. At one point, Patricia managed to free herself just enough to kick a metal rod toward Henry. He caught it and used it to finally knock the knife from Harry's hand. Security forces, already called by Henry's men, stormed in seconds later. Harry was tackled to the ground, screaming curses as they dragged him away in handcuffs. Patricia ran into Henry's arms, tears streaming down her face. He held her tightly, whispering over and over, "You're safe now. I've got you. I'll always have you." Back at the Grant mansion, the news spread fast. Mr. Francis Grant tried to cover up the scandal, but it was useless. He became a laughingstock overnight. His kingdom of lies crumbled around him, leaving him and Madame Lydia with nothing but shame. After the chaos at the warehouse, Henry didn't waste a second. He scooped Patricia carefully into his arms and rushed her straight to the hospital. Though she kept insisting she was fine, Henry wouldn't take any chances. "I need to make sure you're truly okay," he said gently, brushing her hair away from her bruised face. Patricia smiled weakly. "You're such a worrier now." "I have good reason," Henry said, holding her even tighter. At the hospital, the doctors ran routine tests and examined her injuries. Thankfully, apart from a few bruises and scratches, Patricia was declared safe and healthy. But just as they were getting ready to leave, the doctor called them back into the office. "There's something else," the doctor said, smiling warmly. "Congratulations. Miss Patricia, you're pregnant." For a moment, neither Henry nor Patricia said a word. They just stared at the doctor, blinking, as if they hadn't heard him properly. Then Patricia gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Henry's eyes widened in pure, stunned joy. "You mean, we're having a baby?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. The doctor nodded. Henry turned to Patricia, tears shining in his usually cold, sharp eyes. She laughed, a bright, beautiful sound, and threw herself into his arms. Henry hugged her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. "I promise," he whispered. "I'll protect you, both of you, forever." A few days later, a special dinner was arranged at the Brown family home. It was time for formal introductions. No more secrets, no more lies. Patricia stood proudly before her parents, holding Henry's hand. "I want you to meet my choice," she said softly, looking up at him with love in her eyes. "This is Henry. He's the man I love." Her father gave a small smile, nodding with quiet approval.
But it was Patricia's mother who broke down in tears, rushing forward to hug both of them tightly. "You have no idea how long I have prayed for this day," she said, her voice shaking. "Henry's mother and I were best friends. This was her dream. And mine too." Patricia and Henry exchanged emotional glances. This time there was no business deal. No forced engagement. No tricks. This time it was love, pure and free. The months flew by quickly after that. The scandal faded into distant gossip. Grant Group flourished under Henry's leadership. Patricia's pregnancy bloomed beautifully. And soon, it was time for the grand celebration. Their wedding was nothing short of magical. Held in the city's most luxurious venue, surrounded by family, friends, and even old business partners who now genuinely admired them. Golden lights sparkled above their heads. Soft music floated through the air. White roses lined the grand hall. Patricia walked down the long aisle in a stunning lace gown, her beauty breathtaking, her step steady. Henry stood waiting at the altar, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. When their eyes met, the entire room seemed to disappear. It was just them. Two broken souls, healed by love. Two stubborn hearts, finally finding their home. As they exchanged vows, there were tears and laughter, promises and kisses. When Henry finally lifted her veil and kissed her deeply, the entire hall erupted into cheers and applause. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a victory. Love had won, the lies were gone, the past was behind them, and ahead, nothing but endless days of happiness, together, forever.